As twilight descends over the ancient hemlock groves, you venture deep into the Pennsylvania wilds. Silence wraps around you until you hear it. It builds into a low, guttural sob that rises and falls in ragged waves. The crying grows closer. It is laced with a desperation that tugs at you. In the gloom, you catch a glimpse of the creature, a shambling, hunched form with skin a patchwork of sags and warts that gleam in the half-light. The pig-like creature, hideous in its form, unleashes a wail that pierces the soul, tears streaming down its malformed hide. The creature collapses like wet paper and dissolves into a shimmering puddle of tears that soaks into the ground with a final, bubbling sigh. So join us today on Within the Mist, where we chase the puddles left by America's saddest creature, the squonk.
What?
We are going to be talking about a very different type of creature.
It sounded more like a noise than a thing. Squonk!
That would be interesting if that was the noise it makes, but it usually makes more of a crying sound, as you'll find out.
Oh, is this gonna be sad?
It's a very sad creature.
Oh no! I don't like sad creatures.
No. Well, hello and welcome to the Within the Mist podcast, where we share tales of cryptids, ghosts, and other mysteries. I am your host, Gary, and my lovely wife, GoldieAnn, joins me as our co-host. Hello, GoldieAnn.
Hi, Gary.
It's been a very busy month already, with it being October. We've done the Jurassic Haunt at Florida's Dinosaur World. I've gone on a skunk ape campout. We have now done a corn maze, and we've come out alive. And I've even started doing some of the ghost tours through Winter Garden, Florida, telling some of the spooky tales of the charming little city with a juicy past.
And I'll tell you, he went on the Bigfoot hunt and stayed camping overnight all by himself. And he didn't get scared. I was so proud of him.
Well, tell them why you didn't come.
I was doing something. What was I doing?
Yeah, being scared of snakes.
No. I said, yeah, you can have the snakes.
I know. So this is the woman who will walk into a haunted house with a serial killer, will go out into the forest with dogmen and werewolves, but if something slithers through the ground, and it's pretty much off limits.
I'll jump into Dogman's arms. Save me, Dogman!
But luckily you didn't have to deal with that. You do have to deal with today's topic, and we're going to be talking about the squonk, which is going to be described as a very ugly pig-like creature. And it has many traits that we're going to talk about, but one of its most interesting one is that it has a love of Shakespeare's plays.
Yes. Nice.
Especially Hamlet.
Oh, God! No!
You walked into that one eyes wide open.
It. I'm tired. We walked thousands of miles today.
Maybe a couple 1,000 steps, but I don't think it was miles.
Ew.
Well, for our audience that's listening, today's episode is going to feature a creature that is considered the saddest that we've ever talked about before. And it has a unique ability to escape danger. The story might be frightening to some of our listeners, and we are storytellers of cryptids, ghosts, and other mysteries, and don't intentionally mean to be frightening. Well, maybe just a little. Please remember, listener discretion is always advised. And with that, we can begin today's episode. Chapter 1: The Trails of Tears and Vanishings. In cryptid lore, encounters with the Squonk are less fights of claw and fang than they are tales of encounters with creaturely despair, ending not in trophies, but in tearful defeat. These stories, passed down by loggers and lumberjacks, paint a picture of futile pursuits. The Squonk does not fight, it escapes by evaporation. Let me explain. One of the most endearing accounts hails from the frostbitten wilds near Mount Alto, Pennsylvania, in the waning years of the 19th century. J.P. Wentling, a U.S. Forestry Service worker, formerly of Pennsylvania, but living at the time in St. Anthony Park, Minnesota, had ventured into the woods near Mount Alto. The legends drew him from the region's logging camps since the late 19th century. This area, which is part of the broader Appalachian chain, was a mixture of recovering forests and the old trees. This particular night was unbroken except for the moon's pale glow illuminating frost-covered trails. Wentling, who was familiar with the frigid winters of these woods, prepared for the hunt on a night when the temperature plunged to its coldest, slowing the Squonk's tears and confining it to the hemlock trees. The creature's range was limited to these hemlock-dominated forests, where it traveled at twilight and dusk, its pathetic nature making it a phantom even amongst the more fearsome critters of lumberjack lore. You see, the creature always had a fear of seeing its reflection, so as the moon climbed higher, it hid more and more in the shadows. Wentling pressed deeper into the gloom. The air carried a chill that seeped through layers of clothing, and it mingled with the scent of the hemlocks, trees that had once fueled the tannery business, their bark stripped in vast quantities during the logging heyday. Here, amidst the regenerating saplings that had been painted by the early foresters, the Squonk's tear-stained trail would gleam silver, a path of moisture leading through the underbrush, where every rustle could be anything lurking just out of sight. But Wentling sought the most morbid creature of them all, a beast whose very unhappiness manifested in a constant crying. Its weeping was a low, pleading sound, soft and sorrowful under the boughs. Drawing upon the cunning born of a woodsman's knowledge, Wentling employed a very clever tactic. He mimicked the Squonk's own crying sounds, a series of low wails that echoed through the air.
Uh-oh. Better be careful not to make him mad. Doesn't know what kind of creature this is.
Well, he was able to deceive the Squonk into perceiving a kindred spirit in its own despair. It thought it was hearing the sounds of another Squonk crying in the dark. The forest itself seemed to hold its breath. The usual nocturnal sounds, the distant hoot of an owl or the scurry of small creatures, faded into the silence, broken only by the artificial sobs. From the shadows emerged a response to the hunter's cries, a tentative, stuttering weeping sound, growing in volume as the hideous Squonk, lured by the promise of shared sorrow, approached. Its form, even though it was shrouded in darkness, would have been a very pitiful and sad sight. It resembled a pig with pointed ears that bent at an unnatural angle. and it had loose skin that seemed to sag like an ill-tailored suit. Warts and discolored moles distorted its hide. Eyes were baggy, with tears constantly running down its face. This was a being so ugly it shunned even its own reflection in the moonlit pools scattered throughout the land.
How can it think it's ugly if it's an animal? I mean, they don't have that kind of brain.
Well, the squonk obviously does.
And an animal can't be ugly.
To the squonk, his form is completely hideous, and he is embarrassed and sad to show his face in the forest to any other animal. It's kind of a unique trait amongst the squonk.
That's insane. That's crazy.
Well, the squonk is a crazy story.
Well, I will go save him.
Okay. Well, in the meantime, this squonk was induced by the mimic cry, and it hopped trustingly into a sack that Wentling had prepared.
Wow. Okay, it's dumb, too.
Very dumb. And just as he got inside the sack, Wentling tied off the end, and the sad critter was trapped inside. Its weight settled heavily on his shoulder as he slung it for the journey home, and the weeping sounds vibrated through the burlap sack. Wentling trudged onward the path, his boots crunching over the frozen earth, past the rows of young trees in the moonlight. The path wound through the Mont Alto State Park area, which is Pennsylvania's oldest incorporated land in 1913, where the remnants of logging railroads and charcoal hearths whispered of the ghosts of lumberjacks past. But as the miles stretched, an unnatural lightness crept into the sack. It seemed to weigh less and less the longer he walked, and the longer the crying continued. The constant weeping, that rhythmic sob that had once accompanied each step, tapered into silence.
Oh, no.
A chill unrelated to the night air gripped Wentling as he took the sack off of his shoulder, and the fabric was now limp and unnaturally damp. Peering inside under the moon's unforgiving light, he found no trace of the ugly creature.
Oh, good. Does he get out?
Well, all he found were tears and bubbles, a quivering puddle of where the squonk was.
Oh, no.
The disappointment lingered, a testament to the squonk's ultimate evasion, that whenever this creature is cornered, surprised, or frightened, it dissolves itself entirely into tears, leaving hunters with empty hands and regrets. Now, you would think that this is a unique story, but it is repeated in variant forms. Another version circulated amongst hunters in the early 20th century features an unnamed woodsman who returned empty-handed from a fruitless day of hunting deer in the hollows. This story says that as dusk set at the horizon, he spied the squonk creature rooting near a stream. Unfamiliar with the legend, he mistook it for a wounded game animal and pounced, stuffing the bawling mass of flesh into his rucksack. During the hike back, he was filled with muffled moans that softened to whimpers, and then it too fell silent. When he reached his vehicle, he opened the bag, and it yielded nothing but a damp stain and the faint scent of brine. The creature had gone. No rips, no traces, only the evaporation to tears.
I carried home his grief, and it carried away itself,
the hunter reportedly told his colleagues. There are many such stories. While they may be unverified by modern standards, they still carry on.
So does that mean when they evaporate themselves, they're dead? Can they can they come back?
Do you want to try again?
No. Can they come back?
Not really known. There is a theory that the squonk is connected to the forest. So a lot of its sadness is the forests are cut down, and as they disappear, so do the squonk. As the forest regrows, there is a belief that the squonk will return.
That's sad.
Well, there are a lot of stories about it returning. There's a park ranger in 1952 who claimed that he saw tear tracks near a defunct tannery. There is a group of Boy Scouts in 1968 who were running away from a crying hog thing that vanished into mist near World's End State Park.
Man, bear, pig.
Well, not quite a bear, but yeah, a warty, excess-skinned, wrinkly pig. Now, these are just stories, and they're often dismissed as misidentified animals, perhaps a diseased peccary or a bobcat in distress. But the stories persist, fueled by the squonk's emotional sounds. Rarer still are the supposedly successful captures of the squonk, if one can call them that. Folklore insists that no specimen has ever endured being captured, and the mere pressure of pursuit triggers it to evaporate. One tale from the 1920s describes a taxidermist who received a weeping sample in a sealed jar, only for the tear water to foam by dawn.
How big are they?
As large as a small boar.
Well, how is it was in a jar?
Well, when it turned into tears, that's all that was left was enough to fill in a mason jar.
Oh. Okay.
What is true, though, is that in each encounter with a squonk, the human element mirrors the beast. There's a thrill of the chase that turns into a quiet sadness, leaving the witness and the hunter haunted not by what they saw, but what they caused to vanish.
Because they're mean. They're meanie heads.
Well, they do realize that, and they leave the encounter feeling sad themselves.
Good. Punks.
Well, it is very hard to capture a squonk, and even when you do, all you're left with is a puddle, and it's kind of hard to prove that you caught a pig-like creature if all you're left with is a jar of tears. So this is the squonk, and have you ever heard of such a creature?
Nope.
So let me tell you a little bit more about him.
Okay.
Chapter 2, The Origins from the Lumberjacks. Now, to understand the squonk, we first must step back into America's industrial age. It was the late 19th and early 20th century, a time when the vast hemlock forests of Pennsylvania stood as the livelihood of a booming lumber industry. Towering trees, some older than the country itself, were cut down by the millions to feed the insatiable demand of sawmills, tanneries, and the railroads. Hemlock bark, which is rich in a chemical called tannins, was stripped to cure leather in the tanneries, and it left behind barren hillsides that eroded in heavy rains. By the 1880s, at the height of the timber boom, there would be vast swaths of forests gone. It was in this environment of relentless extraction and environmental ruin that the squonk's legend took root. Perhaps as early as the late 19th century, when Pennsylvania's timber and hunting industries reached their peak and the forests were at a risk of disappearing. Stories back then were the currency in these remote outposts, far from the comforts of civilization. They would be told around crackling campfires to break up the boredom and to ward off the shadows. And amongst these tales emerged the legend of the squonk. The creature coincided with folklore tradition of fearsome critters. These are a collection of animals that are whimsical yet creepy beasts, and they were invented by lumberjacks to entertain, frighten greenhorns, and perhaps cope with the isolation and the hard work they did. Now, all of these stories traveled with the logging camps, from Maine to Upper Mississippi, and even Vancouver Island. But the Squonk remained connected to Pennsylvania's gloom most of all. It became a local specter amidst this pantheon of odd monsters. The Squonk's first documented stories were found in the pages of a peculiar 1910 publication known as Fearsome Creatures of the Lumberwoods, with a few desert and mountain beasts.
Is that an early issue of National Enquirer?
That would be a good way of looking at it. Yes, it was treated that way. It was written by William T. Cox, who was a Pittsburgh-based writer, a conservationist, and a forester with the U.S. Forest Service. And Cox was no mere storyteller. He was a guardian of fading traditions, and he mourned the destruction of the forest and the extinction of old-time loggers. This small book pretended it was a field guide, but it was more of a collection of beasts more commonly known to the lumberjacks of Pennsylvania's wilds. The drawings inside were illustrated by Court Dubois, and the slim book was only 48 pages. But inside those 48 pages are 21 creatures, each sketched with a blend of humor and horror. As Cox wrote, he introduced the Squonk thus:
The range of the Squonk is very limited. Few people outside of Pennsylvania has ever even heard of the quaint beast, which is said to be fairly common in the hemlock forests of that state.
Now, when he writes about the Squonk, he doesn't write about it as a predator, but as a pariah, a creature that was very depressing, slinking through the twilight and dusk. Its body, a tragic mismatch of loose, ill-fitting skin that is riddled with warts and moles. Because of its misfitting skin, it is always unhappy. In fact, it is said, by people who are best able to judge, to be the most morbid of beasts. Now, this wasn't just mere ugliness. It was a torment, a dermatological curse that dooms the Squonk to perpetual self-loathing.
Right. So that's not helpful. Not for the poor little Squonk.
The Squonk should be pitied.
I know. He needs a hug.
Well, the tragedy didn't just end there. His entry assigned it the pseudoscientific name Lacrimocorpus dissolvens, a fabricated Latin title that means tear-bodied dissolver, due to its tendency to dissolve into tears whenever it's cornered. The tales was so loved in Pennsylvania that it evolved further in subsequent publications, each adding new details onto the Squonk's lore. Such as in 1937, the Squonk even appeared in Paul Bunyan's stories.
Really?
In Paul Bunyan and his Great Blue Ox, there's a story titled Paul's Bad Luck, in which a logger mistook a wailing for a fish's cry, and he had captured it in a gunny sack, only to discover salt water and bubbles when he reopened the bag.
Wow.
Attributing the dissolution to the creature's shame over its dull red eyes, comical nose, and warty skin. So the Squonk was even so popular amongst lumberjacks that it was even part of Paul Bunyan's stories.
That's actually really cool. Because I think I had a teacher in some grade that was obsessed with lumberjacks and read us all of Paul Bunyan's.
Then you may have heard this
I
story,
think so.
and you didn't realize it at the time.
Yeah. Because it sounds familiar.
Well, there you go. Yeah, the Squonk is a very solid part of folklore, especially for the forests and the lumberjacks of Pennsylvania and the Midwest.
It's crazy.
By 1939, as the Great Depression ended Pennsylvania's logging heyday, Henry H. Tryon revisited the Squonk legend in his book, Fearsome Critters, which was a slimmer version that was illustrated by his wife, Margaret R. Tryon. Now, Tryon was a New York-based outdoorsman, and he expanded the myth with a pseudo-evolutionary flair, tracing the Squonk's lineage from the high desert plains, where desert flora sustained it, but it traveled to the swampy lakes and finally to Pennsylvania's hemlock forests. History shows beyond dispute that as these areas gradually changed to lake-dotted country, the Squonk was forced to take to the water. Tryon wrote about the Squonk, attributing fossil evidence to drowned hordes of the Squonk.
Oh.
Well, according to him, it was explained that the Squonk was even more deformed than originally believed, and it had webbed toes on only its left feet and didn't have anything on its right. This caused it to circle endlessly in the lakes until it got tired, and as its aquatic awkwardness caused it to swim in futile loops round and round, it perished from starvation. That added a layer of Darwinian cruelty.
Wow.
The Squonk just can't win. Tryon's portrait deepened the description of the Squonk as probably the homeliest animal in the world, and it knows it. A bashful, crepuscular wanderer in loose, warty, singularly ill-fitting skin. Moonlight remains its greatest nemesis, and it forces it to hide in the night, fearing that a reflective glimpse might shatter its fragile psyche. So in the 3 decades that followed Cox's original book, newspaper mentions were rare, and they were often in syndicated columns, and it underscored the Squonk's elusive nature even in print. But don't think the story stopped there. Later stories surfaced in 2014 with Gerard O'Neill's article, The Squonk, A Small Tale from Franklin County.
Wow.
In Supernatural Lore of Pennsylvania, Ghosts, Monsters, and Miracles, edited by Thomas White. Now, this article redefined the Squonk in relation to the vanishing wilderness in folklore, tying its sadness to the sadness of the destroyed environment. Cryptozoologists and folklorists have suggested that the Squonk's legend may draw from older Native American lore. It's possible that the Squonk's origins runs even deeper. Perhaps the Algonquin tales of shape-shifting spirits tied to the land's grief. It seems the Algonquin people of the area, whose languages gave English words like skunk and squash, inhabited regions that overlapped with Pennsylvania's forests, and they told stories about mischievous beings who had grief over destroyed trees. Some speculate that maybe the Squonk's melancholic essence mirrors the Algonquin legends of land-bound sorrow, where spirits mourn the disruption of harmony between humans and nature. Pretty similar to the loggers' tales that mourned the fall of the hemlock trees. So perhaps the spirits that the Algonquin Indians gave might be tied to this tales of this pig-like creature known as the Squonk.
Right. I mean, everything from the native times goes back to everything. They started it all.
And maybe their tales came to life in this ugly pig-like creature that cried because he was so ugly and that the land was turning ugly when the trees are cut down?
Yeah, I would buy it. Mainly because you know how much I love Indian folklore.
That's true. I've noticed that in any of these stories that I write, that if I tie in some of the indigenous tribes' legends, it does support you believing in it.
Yes.
Well, then let me tell you a little bit more and see if this can cement your belief in the Squonk.
Right.
Chapter 3, The Revival of the Squonk. Now, what began as a lumberjack's tale has seeped into American culture. You yourself have admitted that you have heard stories of lumberjacks and Paul Bunyan, and maybe this story was one of them that you were told as a child. But what if I told you that even music, to scientific metaphors, and festivals to fan fiction still portray the Squonk of today? Well, music claimed the Squonk early on. In 1974, Steely Dan evoked Squonk tears in their song, Any Major Dude Will Tell You. This is a sly nod to the dissolvement amidst existential drift.
Huh.
But it was Genesis who immortalized it in 1976, A Trick of the Tail. The track Squonk pulses with melancholy.
Wait, the name of the song is Squonk?
Yeah. On their album, Trick of the Tail.
Wow.
Now, it is a very sad song, and its lyrics trace the creature's flight. Quote, like a leaf on the air, he's gone everywhere, only to melt under the moon's indifferent gaze. Phil Collins, drumming the song, later stated in interviews that the Squonk symbolized the band's own ugly duckling phase, when it was raw, unpolished, yet achingly human.
Very interesting. I really had no clue.
Well, if you want to be part of the Squonk life, no revival captures the return of the story of the Squonk better than Squonkapalooza, Johnstown, Pennsylvania's annual cryptid carnival that launched in 2023 to cheer up Pennsylvania's saddest beast. Now, it was co-founded by artist Joe Fogel, who is a Johnstown native who inspired the city's spirit during years of devastating weather and floods. And he created this to try and support the Squonk and to support the community during some of its saddest periods. And the festival transforms the Bottleworks Ethnic Arts Center into a center of whimsy and woe. Now, attendees, families, cryptid enthusiasts, and storytellers all don Squonk masks of mottled green wax. Their eyes have painted tears, while live music and vendor stalls sell Squonk tears, which are sparkling little bottles of water containing spring water. And it is a great place to buy a warty plushie.
Aw, see?
It's the only way you're going to get a Squonk that doesn't dissolve into tears.
There you go.
Now, the inaugural event drew hundreds of people, and now it swelled to thousands by 2025's third iteration on August 2nd, that even featured parades where participants dissolved dramatically into confetti puddles. Fogel told reporters,
there were all sorts of festivals for Bigfoot and Mothman, but nothing for our ugly little crybaby.
Oh, don't call him that. He'll cry more.
Well, during the revelry, storytellers recount Wendling's sack story, and naturalists discuss the hemlock forest restoration, tying the Squonk's habitat to real ecological tragedies. Yet even here, something deeper creeps in. There are late-night bonfires at Squonkapalooza that yield hushed reports of genuine cries from the nearby Conemaugh River, as if the Squonk, drawn by the noise, can be heard weeping in solidarity with the people.
There's so much detail and so much background to it. I really wasn't expecting that. I mean, I've never heard of it. I mean, and I should have. I mean,
This is a creature that's not aggressive or scary. He's just sad and pitiful. He reminds us that there's always going to be sadness in the world and that we should support each other through those times.
But yeah, so all these different avenues that, some of these avenues you've talked about, I've had in my life. But I've never heard of it. That's just crazy.
Well, I'm glad I brought you something that you missed in your childhood.
Okay.
In conclusion, as we delve deeper, the Squonk unmasks darker truths. In lumberjack lore, where men vanished into the woods, lost to accidents or to the isolation, these creatures explain absences without admitting fear. The squonk, with its self-erasure, mirrors this. Psychological interpretation sees the squonk as an archetype of the shadow self, that ugly part of ourselves that we see, the warts we hide, and the shame that dissolves us under scrutiny. In Pennsylvania's Appalachians, where the coal scars and the deforestation ghosts linger, the squonk resonates as an echo lament. Tears for the hemlock trees that were ravaged by progress, for communities that were destroyed. As our story draws to its tearful close, we return to that hemlock forest. The sobs have softened to a sigh, and the trail glistens under the starlight. The squonk teaches us that some mysteries aren't meant to be captured. They weep to remind us of our own fragile skins, our own hidden warts of doubt. Love yourself. Love who you are. And when you venture into Pennsylvania's North Country at twilight and listen, you might hear it. A plea from the underbrush, ancient as a heartbreak.
Wow. Okay, that was really weird.
Why?
Just not my kind of
The
story.
squonk is a different type of story.
Yeah. Like, just kind of here.
Before we conclude this episode, I want to remind you that we are active on social media and would be delighted to hear your thoughts about today's story. What do you believe happened? And don't hesitate to share your stories and opinions with us. Reach out to us on our Facebook page or check out our Instagram. You can even write to us on our email address at withinthemistpodcast@gmail.com for all who would like to share. I hope you enjoyed today's tale. Come back next week for more about cryptids, ghosts, and other mysteries. But in the meantime, watch the shadows and remain constantly curious. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye, guys.